all this talk of illegal migration in Europe, in the United States, it ultimately comes down to a contest of what is governance. Who is governed? Which countries are governed well? And if so many of these countries around the world are incapable of governing themselves, then it's time for us to put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris instead of actually making their country better.
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes. Enough. Because if you go to these countries and you see how they suffer under absolutely corrupt, made-up governments that are just criminal syndicates, the people of Africa, the people of Latin America, a lot of them deserve better. Now, some countries are really getting it together. Look at what El Salvador did. Bukele, murder capital of Latin America, he said, no more. Now El Salvador is safer than Prince William County.
And he took
just south of Washington, D.C. He put all the
drug cartel
MS-13 guys
leaders in prison.
Ecuador, about to do the same thing. New president there. The previous presidential candidate had been assassinated, but new guy gets elected. He announces he's contracted with the same building contractor that they built the prisons in El Salvador. Going to build them in Ecuador. The prisoners there, the cartels revolt and try to take over the capital in Ecuador a couple weeks ago. So it's not all bad. There's some great governance.
Argentina.
I like Argentina. God bless Milei. I mean, yes. So, but the countries that cannot fix themselves, particularly in Africa, the worst, it's time to think about other governance options because they are clearly not capable of self-governance.
Or bringing the professionalism they need to capitalize on their own natural resources.
And the most of all, stop lending, stop the aid programs, which really only benefit the elites in those countries to the detriment of the little guys.
Or it's benefiting China, right, who's taking over building infrastructure.
Sure, because China doesn't care about the governance. They do black bag diplomacy, paying cash to the right people to get what they need signed, and they're on their way.
All right, well, for our exit here on this conversation, it seems to me like the United States is in a foot race with disaster. That Iran's
Everyone talks about British colonialism, but what about the French? That's a whole empire that's getting left out of the story. By the early 1900s, France controlled large areas of Africa, Asia, the Caribbean and the Pacific. Over 50 colonies. But what they don't teach you is actually how brutal it really was. Take Madagascar. France invaded in 1895 and turned it into a colony a year later. The locals were forced to build roads, work on plantations, and serve the French economy under a system that allowed punishment without trial. In 1947, the Malagasy people rebelled. France responded with torture, public executions, and scorched earth tactics. Entire villages were wiped out, and up to 100,000 people were killed. Did you ever hear about that in school? I certainly didn't. Let's move on to South America and French Guiana. Still a French territory today, but from the mid-1800s to the 1950s, it was the home of the Devil's Island, one of the most brutal penal colonies on Earth. Prisoners were dumped there to die of starvation, malaria, or madness. Political dissidents, petty criminals. Even Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish army officer falsely accused of treason. Most never made it out. Now to the Pacific and French Polynesia. From 1966 to 1996, France detonated 193 nuclear bombs on its islands. People were never warned, and many still suffer from cancer and birth defects to this day. France denied responsibility for decades. That's like nuclear colonialism. And during both world wars, France relied heavily on soldiers from its Asian and African colonies. They fought on the front lines and died in Europe's wars. But after the fighting, no pensions and no recognition. In 1944, when Senegalese veterans protested for fair treatment, France opened fire on them. This was the Thiaroye massacre, and it's barely known, even in France. Here's the truth. French colonialism is not just borders and flags. It was about domination, exploitation, and violence. And much of it is hidden or denied. And in some places like Guadeloupe, Martinique, Réunion, and Mayotte, France still holds control. And colonialism doesn't just vanish when independence is declared either. Its scars still run deep in wealth gaps, in erased cultures, and in silence throughout history books. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, keep listening, because that empire did not fall.
Right now we have slogans as Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanism. Some of us even think that we can still make democracy work. It does not work. It has not worked. We don't need democracy. We need dictators who dictate the right thing. Our governance was thrown through the window. Why am I saying this? You need to know how the system was structured, so that when you are decolonizing it, you know how to reconstruct it. Right now we have slogans as Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanism. Some of us even think that we can still make democracy work. It does not work. It has not worked. We don't need democracy. We need dictators who dictate the right thing. I mean, you have a toilet that is dysfunctional, then you must have a committee that discusses the toilet, then a subcommittee that discusses the toilet, then a requisition committee and a procurement committee. Then we must have a tendering system. After the tendering system, 16 months later, we are still waiting for, damn you, fix the toilet. Democracy is a colonized way that stifles progress and development.
Is what enabled Britain to make its African empire starting around 1890. So Africa fell under a completely brutal European rule. The Europeans were not nice. Germany committed a genocide in West Africa in the first decade of the 20th century. That was Germany's first genocide. It was followed by the second genocide in World War II. The British were god-awful. The European powers in general were god-awful. The Belgians, of course, we know King Leopold was mad. And the Belgians chopped off the hands of thousands and thousands of Congolese who they accused of whatever petty crime and so forth. So it was a very, very brutal period. And Africa remained impoverished up through the middle of the 20th century. Literacy rates in 1950, 5%. All that empire, they didn't want to give schools, they didn't want to educate anybody. So Africa became independent in some countries with 4 or 5 people with a high school education out of millions. The Portuguese were maybe the worst at this because Portugal was pretty poorly educated at home and it did nothing in its colonies in Africa, in Mozambique or Angola and other places. But in general, the European imperialists were completely nasty and dreadful, and Africa was impoverished at the start. It was also a rather small population. Africa had about 9% of the world population in 1950, and health conditions were miserable, mortality rates of infants extraordinarily high. Then came independence, came the beginnings of literacy, came the beginnings of health care, came the beginnings of malaria control, and so forth. Child survival rose, and that meant that population started to grow, and Africa's population went from 9% of the world in 1950 to about 18% today. That's actually getting there, because Africa, if you add up the 55 countries of the African Union, that's about 1.5 billion people, same size as India, same size as China. The big difference is that the imperial powers divided Africa into 55 little countries, not one of which can thrive on its own, whereas India and China, because of the history, remained.
Welcome back, family. I'm so happy today because when I see how Africa is moving, when I see how Africa is progressing, when I see how Africans are waking up, and when I see how Africans are responding to the world, it gives me hope. It gives me hope, and I feel like the dreams and agendas of my freedom fighters were not just gone in vain. Their deaths were not just in vain, but they planted a seed that today is giving out some fruits, some good fruits that the world is even afraid of. Today, America is not able to control Africa anymore because Africans today are awake, and the generation that we are having today in Africa are not that generation that were used to be dictated, to be manipulated. Today, youths are waking up. They wake up. They go and fight for what they know and they believe it belongs to them. Now, our liberator, Captain Ibrahim Traore, came out boldly and awakened Africans. We lived under the dictatorship, under the manipulation, under white system, under white supremacies, under white policies like democracies, which have been controlling Africa like remote, which has coming to tell us, which has been the one controlling us, telling us what to do in our own land. So today, since the time of slavery, the whites played the major role by making sure that Africans in Africa don't unite with the African diaspora. But this narrative has been there for so long, and many people came to believe that Africa is worst. And when you are living maybe in diaspora, you are not allowed or you are not supposed to come in Africa because Africa was not fit and was not good for you. But now as times goes by, things are coming to change. Today, Africans need to be left alone. And not only that, we need our heritage. We need our stolen artifacts. We need our everything that was stolen here in Africa. We need our resources. We need in fact, we need everything that was taken here in Africa. And today, people are not just silenced. People are waking up, and people are going even in the museums in Europe, in America, to reclaim their heritages that has been kept in jars, in screens, in mirrors, being used as trophies, being used as a tourist attractions. So this is a time that I believe that today the world has to pay attention, and everything, for Africa to be how it has been all that long, there are some tactics that were used that has kept Africa to be what it has been all that long. They used to silence the youths of the voices, the voices of the youths. They used to silence the voices of every Pan-Africanist who wake up to stand for this great continent. They used to destroy and eliminate anyone who was coming out and go against the will, all the agreements of Westerners. But because today the people and Africa today are coming out, and we know that we can do it. We know that they used to tell Africans that if we go against them, they are going to sanction us. But we have come to realize that we are the one who is supposed to sanction them. Because what is sanction? What is sanction? If we sanction America today, they cannot withstand. If we sanction Europe today, they cannot withstand. I've just give you a simple example of what has happened in West African countries, in Sahel region. They expelled France in their countries. What happened? Today France is thriving. Today France is suffering. Today France is no longer able to stand by itself. It's no longer able to provide by itself. Today France is suffering. They are suffering because they are not able. Their countries, the government is bankrupt. They've been using other people's money, other people's richness, other people's wealth to build themselves. But because the people who are concerned today are the people who know who they are, they know what they are having and the worthy of all that they are having in their countries. That's why they are no longer able to allow any people or anybody to come and manipulate them. We are not going to allow this. So today, Africa is like a new sheriff in town. No one is able to come today and control Africa. That's why we say that by 2063, Africa is not a dream, but it's going to achieve the agenda of ruling the world. The black power is coming out soon. and people are going to be surprised by things that is coming, that's going to come out of Africa. Today we are watching black Americans coming in Africa to unite with their brothers and sisters whom they were departed a long time ago. And this is happening because this was a prophecy. This was a prophecy. We believed in this. We believed in this. So I think this is the time, the awaited time that our enslaved forefathers knew that well, that this time will come and their dreams, their agendas will be achieved. And this the generation that was awaited and was believed that will come to achieve these dreams and these agendas. So I think today I'll not take much of your time. Kindly leave a comment. Tell me what to have the comment section. I am talking to the black people where I'm watching from. I know that you're so impressed, you're so satisfied by all that is happening today across the world and how Africa is responding to the world and how we are as Africans, we are dealing with things and that has been seen as a threat to our rising, to our development, to our independence, to our freedom. Because today Africans, we know who we are and we are not ready to be manipulated, to be told what to do, because we know who we are. Until next time, we can be the same. Thank you very much for being here each and every time. I appreciate your support because you are doing great. Join my membership, subscribe, share, send me super thanks. I'll appreciate because you are doing great, and I'll make sure that I respond to each and every question pumps. And I'll make sure that I respond to each and every comment that pops in my comment section, because this is a time that we have to discuss and make Africa the better place. And may you be blessed wherever you are watching from.